Emily Carter was a 28-year-old single mother who lived a structured and careful life in a quiet neighborhood where nothing unusual ever seemed to happen. And on the night she disappeared, everything followed her normal routine as she put her son to bed, finished her chores, and settled into the silence of her home. But sometime between late evening and the early hours of the morning, she vanished without any noise, struggle, or sign that anything was wrong. And by the time morning came, her young son was found alone in the living room watching television, unaware that anything had changed, while Emily's phone remained charging, her purse untouched, and her shoes still by the door. Or with the front door left unlocked in a way that immediately raised suspicion because it suggested she either stepped out briefly or opened the door for someone she trusted. And when police arrived, they found no forced entry, no signs of violence, and no evidence of a break-in, which led them to focus on people close to her, especially those she would willingly allow into her home. And during early questioning, one name began to stand out: Daniel Reeves, a man who was not officially her partner but had been around frequently enough to be familiar and trusted. And when detectives spoke to him, he appeared calm, cooperative, and composed, providing a clean and perfectly structured timeline that lacked the uncertainty most people show under stress, which made investigators uneasy because real memories are rarely that precise. Yet at that stage, there was no direct evidence tying him to her disappearance. And as days passed, search efforts intensified with volunteers and officers covering nearby areas, until 16 days later, a hiker discovered something in a remote location that led authorities to Emily's body, which had been deliberately hidden and showed clear signs of manual strangulation, indicating a personal and controlled act that required close contact, time, and intent. And this discovery shifted the investigation immediately toward homicide, with Daniel Reeves becoming the primary focus. But when police returned to his apartment, they found it empty. Not in a chaotic or rushed way, but in a deliberate and organized manner where his belongings, electronics, and personal items had all been removed, suggesting he had planned his disappearance in advance rather than reacting impulsively after the crime. And within days, it became clear that Daniel had successfully vanished as his financial activity stopped. His phone went inactive, and no digital or physical trace could be found, leading investigators to conclude that he had either received assistance or had prepared a secondary identity long before committing the crime. And despite initial efforts to locate him, the trail quickly went cold as weeks turned into months and months into years, eventually causing the case to be archived as leads dried up and no new evidence emerged, leaving Emily's family without answers, while her son grew up with only the knowledge that his mother had disappeared and never returned. And during those decades, Daniel Reeves did not remain hidden in isolation, but instead rebuilt his life under a new identity, eventually becoming a man known as Michael Turner, who lived in a different state with stable routines, steady employment, and a reputation that never drew attention, blending into society so completely that no one around him suspected he had a past connected to a violent crime. And he maintained this life carefully, paying taxes, interacting normally with others, and avoiding anything that could expose inconsistencies, which allowed him to live freely for more than 30 years while the original case remained unresolved. But as time passed, technology advanced and investigative methods improved, particularly in the areas of facial recognition and database integration, allowing cold cases to be re-examined with tools that did not exist at the time of the original investigation. And during one such review, a forensic analyst revisited Emily Carter's case and decided to run archived images through updated comparison systems, not expecting a significant result, but hoping for any possible lead. And what came back was a partial match that aligned with a man currently living under the name Michael Turner, whose facial structure, bone alignment, and aging projections closely resembled those of Daniel Reeves. And although the match was not immediately conclusive, it was strong enough to justify further investigation, leading authorities to begin discreet surveillance of Michael Turner to confirm his identity before taking action. And over several weeks, they observed his daily life, noting his routines, behavior, and interactions, all of which appeared completely normal, as he woke up at consistent times, left for work, returned home, and maintained a predictable lifestyle that showed no outward signs of criminal behavior, which made the situation more unsettling because it demonstrated how effectively he had integrated into society. And once investigators gathered sufficient evidence, they moved in to arrest him, approaching him quietly outside his home and addressing him not as Michael Turner but as Daniel Reeves. A moment that caused a brief but telling reaction that confirmed their suspicions, and he was taken into custody without resistance, bringing an end to more than 3 decades of evasion. And during the search of his residence, authorities discovered multiple forms of identification, documents supporting his assumed identity, and financial reserves that indicated long-term planning, along with a locked container that contained old newspaper clippings related to Emily Carter's case, and a preserved photograph of her, suggesting that despite his attempt to erase his past, he had never completely detached from it. And during interrogation, he did not display strong emotion or denial, but instead remained detached and controlled, offering minimal responses and avoiding direct admissions. Yet when asked about Emily, he made a single statement, saying that she trusted him, which investigators interpreted as an indication of motive rooted in control rather than impulsive violence. And during the trial, the case was presented with accumulated evidence showing both his involvement in the murder and his decades-long effort to avoid detection, while Emily's son, now an adult, witnessed the proceedings and finally confronted the reality of what had happened. And the court ultimately found Daniel Reeves guilty, bringing a formal conclusion to the case after more than 30 years, with the judge emphasizing the length of time he had lived freely while a family endured unanswered questions. And although the conviction did not undo the loss or restore the years taken, it provided a sense of closure that had been absent for decades, highlighting how someone can commit a calculated crime, successfully disappear, and build a new identity, yet still be identified and held accountable as advancements in technology and persistence. An investigation eventually bridged the gap between the past and the present,